the great majority of Shiites endorse Hezbollah's narrative about the tribunal. Thanks to our own lobbying effort, the Christian street is divided on this issue. Now, though a great majority of the Lebanese Sunnis supports the tribunal, they are, in my opinion, right now suffering from what I call a leadership deficit on this issue and on many other issues affecting them. So still, they are still betting that they can get away with this and Mikati will stay in his post. And remember, I mean, as I said earlier, they need to keep that cabinet in place given all that is that's going on around them. Whether this is going to be the case or not is still hard to predict. It all depends on how they're going to bring down the funding as well as the agreement eventually between the STL and the Lebanese government. And my bet is that they will be able to find a way to meet those two mutually exclusive objectives. Let the tribunal die in a slow death, in a way, if you can say so, and at the same time keep the Mikati cabinet in place. Now, how will the Arab uprisings affect Hezbollah's regional standing? Now, beyond the impact of the Syrian uprising on Hezbollah, which I've already alluded to, Hezbollah is increasingly facing the risk of being out of sync with the passions and interests of the Arab publics and eventually losing their support. As a movement that prides itself on being the leader of an Arab resistance movement, Arab publics, and especially Sunni Islamists, have always been an important constituency for Hezbollah. Since its founding in the early 80s, one relationship and one principle have anchored Hezbollah's politics and actions and remain to be the case. And this has not changed despite the many years that have passed since the early 80s. The first is the relationship, which is their bond, the multi-layered bond that exists between Hezbollah and Iran's theocratic regime. And the principle is their unwavering commitment to resisting Israeli occupation of Arab lands and standing up to US policies in the Middle East. This has been, continues to be, their raison d'etre and their principal claim to leadership in the Arab region. Now, both the relationship and this principle, which really anchor and frame Hezbollah's political paradigm, are now at the roots of what portend to be a growing divide between Hezbollah and the Arab publics. Citizens in Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, Bahrain, Libya, Syria are redefining the nature of Arab politics, and they are changing the priority of political activism away from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to resistance to ruling regimes. So the Arab world today is increasingly being defined by rights of citizens before Arab states and not as combatants against the outside world. This emerging narrative is what will create further down the road a divide between Hezbollah and their Arab constituents. On one hand, their close identification with the Iran theocracy and their support of the Assad regime puts them in the camp of countries opposed to the values and aspiration of their people for freedom and good governance. Iran's supposed democratic Islamic government has little appeal in the Arab world. TV viewers in the Arab world did not forget the Iranian regime's draconian suppression of the 2009 pro-democracy protest. Moreover, the Arab uprisings have been fairly secular. They were not about Islam is the solution. When Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, declared that the Arab uprising represent an Islamic awakening akin to Iran's 1979 revolution, he was immediately rebuffed by none other than the spokesperson of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. As the citizen revolt starts yielding to more democratic political orders, and after the recent events in Egypt, there are more and more people doubting this. I'm one of those who believes that the course is irreversible. There will be setbacks, ups and downs, but we are heading in that direction. Hezbollah's Iranian ally will become more of a liability than an asset for Hezbollah in the Arab region. The second point, which is their claim to leadership, which is the military resistance to Israel. So while the Palestinian cause will remain near and dear to Arabs in the future, it will no longer define regional politics above and beyond the struggle for reform and democracy. The old regional order, pitting the countries in the pro-US, pro-peace with Israel camp against the resistance front, is unraveling. where Hezbollah's military resistance will fit in this new order is yet to be determined. However, the new fault line going forward will be between those that have embraced the Arab Spring with all its values and politics versus those that stand opposed to it. As a result, military resistance will no longer be a sufficient guarantor for Hezbollah's leadership role in the Arab region, a role which it has enjoyed, nurtured, cultivated, relied on since 2000 and more so since 2006. More and more, we are seeing Turkey with its booming economy, its working democracy, its embrace of what Premier Erdogan calls secular Islamism, becoming a better champion or being perceived in the Arab region as a better champion of the Palestinian cause than either Iran and or Hezbollah. Now, the question then going forward is how would that affect Hezbollah's politics at home and in the region? And this I will leave for the question and answer session as well as for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Randa. Thank you. Very interesting. Why don't you stay up front? Fascinating overview of Hezbollah in this very, very complicated time that they're going through. For those of us Hezbollah watchers in the room, I don't think we've ever seen them in such a comfortable situation domestically, but internationally so challenged in terms of their status that they really are looking increasingly anachronistic. You mentioned, and I'll just start the Q&A with a question. You mentioned that they're assuming Assad is either going to remain in power or Syria will face civil war. Those are the two contingencies they're planning for. If you could talk a little bit about what the internal discussion is then if Syria leans toward a civil war, what Hezbollah is thinking in terms of what its role might be. And also, is there anybody thinking about the third possible outcome, which is the collapse of Assad and how that would affect Hezbollah and its role clearly in Lebanon and also in Syria, if you could address that.
These are two big questions. Okay. In case of a civil war, first, let me take a step back and say that there has been reports in the press about Hezbollah fighters being on the scene in Syria, fighting in the ranks of the Assad regime. So far, there has been a denial by Hezbollah of this being the case. During this last trip to the region, I interviewed a number of Syrian opposition leaders, since I'm working on a paper about what's going on in Syria, and people who are who are inside Syria, so part of the internal opposition leadership. And on this particular question, where do they view Hezbollah and Iran role in the current uprisings? And their response has been that there is definitely an Iranian involvement in support of the Assad regime, mostly in terms of providing assistance with technological equipment to help with the cyberspace war that is being engaged against the opposition activists. And that Hezbollah's fighters are not necessarily right there, fighting the army. After all, as they put it, the Syrian army does not need Hezbollah to be able to, do this fight. But Hezbollah's is helping with intelligence operatives on the ground who are infiltrating many of the opposition activist cells, especially because they speak Arabic and, they can mimic in a way the accent, so they can easily infiltrate many of these cells and provide that kind of intelligence to both the Iranians and to the Syrian. So that's the extent of, based on, as I said, Syrian activists who are inside Syria. What struck me this time is the lack of real deliberation going on inside Hezbollah's ranks or inside Hezbollah's circles that usually are entrusted with scenario building, about what are the implications to Hezbollah of Assad's demise. Now,